Welcome, everybody. Glad you're here. Good evening. Welcome to the 2018 City of Douglasville Town Hall series. We are here in Arbor Station. This is Ward 1, and we're hoping, I think, to try to get one of these in just about each of the wards this year to help explain a lot of what the City of Douglasville has on tap, and it is quite a lot. There's a number of issues, a number of items we're going to go over tonight, and we'll hit them one by one, and we've got some incredibly talented people far smarter than me to explain these things to you, so you don't want me doing that. I would like, before I begin, to acknowledge we have a fellow City Councilman, Chris Watts, here. Thank you for coming, Chris. Appreciate that. And we also have our City Manager, Marcia Hampton, hiding somewhere in the back. Thank you, Marcia, for coming. Appreciate that. The mayor could not make it. She is in Savannah, I believe, tonight, or on her way back from the conference. So we'll just dive in. We have a nice long list of items, and the first thing that we're going to talk about is Splice. And it's something that you voted for, what year was that, 2016, I believe? It was passed, where we added a penny onto the sales tax that would be dedicated toward various special projects throughout the city and also throughout the county. But we're going to talk about, again, this is the City of Douglasville presentation. We're going to be talking just about city business, city items. So we have with us tonight a guest, Steve Tiedemann with AECom, who will explain to you how the Schloss was broken down. It was broken into various infrastructure categories that you see here, which includes transportation, public safety, parks and rec, and city facilities. So, Steve, would you like to come?
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you. My name is Steve Tiedemann. I manage the transportation portion of the Splice program for the city. I'm with AECom, and of the $30 to $34 million in Splice proceeds, 45% of that is going to go to transportation. And we have resurfacing is one good project that gets a lot done. It's something you can see on the ground. It protects our infrastructure. It's nice to have a lot of roads and streets and things like that, but not only do you have them, then you have to protect them to keep them from deteriorating. And so we have a budget of about $4.6 million in this program. Right now we have about $4.4 million under contract, and we have about another $1 million that's almost ready to go in another resurfacing package, so we might end up getting some money from other sources. Part of the $4.4 million has some state money in there as well, and so you will probably notice that they're already doing some paving back here in the subdivision, and the Parkway Circle right here is scheduled. It's been let, and it should be under construction here pretty soon, and even better, the Arbor Parkway will be resurfaced, and as you know, that badly needs to be redone as well. So that'll be done within the hopefully within the next month, definitely within the next 2 months. And so also we have some other transportation projects that are in that. There's the Douglas Boulevard with a budget of $1.8 million, and I'll get into that more in a minute. And then we also have the I-20 at Fairburn, the Fairburn Road interchange. The contract that's under construction now that's going on in the Arbor Station consists of 58 streets, 14.3 miles with a budget of $3.2 million, and it's supposed to be finished in November. It may be a little bit longer because we had a little bit of a rainy summer, so the contractor got put behind a little bit. And then the Riverbank subdivision down in the southeast corner of the city that one's already finished. And we have an LMIG contract that has state funding that we just matched that. And we have 4 streets that are under construction now. And I think that the Parkway Circle is one of those in that contract. And then we have Douglas Boulevard, which is, you know, Douglas Boulevard right there around the mall is pretty wide open. It's not very attractive. And the project consists of pavement patching, resurfacing. That pavement has been there a long time. And it's going to include landscaping, access management. We try to close some of the driveways. There's a lot of driveways in some areas. And so we try to manage that if we can. Also, the addition of sidewalks and multi-use paths in that area, and the creation of a landscape median in place of the center turn lane. So this is right there in the area of the mall. And the last open house that we had, the question came up, why are you doing anything right there around the mall? It's the mall. Nobody's right there in that area. But the thing is, the mall's a big revenue generator for the city. It generates a lot of jobs. And so it's also, some public money has to go into protecting that resource. And in this case, it's just kind of it's visible from the interstate. And so we think it's important to kind of help the area to be a little bit more friendly, and the entrances on either end to be a little bit more friendly. And so it'll be a nice project when it's done. And then we also have the I-20 at Fairburn Road Gateway project. As you know, right now, it's pretty much an eyesore. There's a lot of erosion. There's a lot of just bare dirt. And so we've already come up with a landscaping plan to redo this area. If you've been down around Six Flags, they've just done a couple of interchanges around there. And I don't think it's going to be that planning intensive, but it'll look a lot nicer than what it does right now. And then we also have two projects that are at the top of the list that are the Fairburn Road, State Route 92 streetscape, and the Dallas Highway. Those are the two portions of 92 that will be abandoned once the State Route 92 underpass is finished under the railroad there. And so there's on the southern end of, south of Norfolk Southern is Fairburn Road, and then north of there is Dallas Highway. And so those will end up being abandoned by the state, and they will come over to the city. And the projects will be to do some sort of a streetscape there, especially on the Fairburn Road side. There's a lot of pavement there that won't be needed that much, and so we have a lot of opportunity to do there. We could do multi-use paths. The new State Route 92 will have a multi-use path on the east side of it going up the entire way. And so it'll be a nice project. And then we also have the Church Street streetscape, which will run from basically Rose Avenue all the way to State Route 92. Part of that's already been done by previous projects, but it'll do a streetscape through the whole city area. And then there's also the three other interchanges there. The three other interchanges, Thornton Road, Chapel Hill, and Bill Arp, that will do the same thing to that we're going to be doing at the State Route 92 and I-20. What we wanted to do was see how much that project was going to end up being before we tackled the other three. So right now we have a little bit better idea of that. And then one of the final projects we have is a community center parking lot. That's out at Public Safety. And if you've ever been to the community center, there is no parking there. And so you have to walk from one end of the building all the way to the other. And so we're going to add 40 spaces to that. It's already under construction now. And so that'll be a welcome addition there to the public safety building. And the duration will only be about 3 months. So they just got started the 1st of October, end of September. And so they'll be done before Christmas. And so if you're familiar with the public safety building, that's looking at it from 92, and it's this little portion right over there. And that's all I have for the transportation portion of it.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that. You're welcome. Does anybody have any questions on? Yes, sir. You can. There's a microphone up here if you want to come over and speak. That way everybody can hear. And
I was just curious, when you mentioned Douglas Boulevard, you mentioned sidewalks and multi-use trails. Where exactly will they be on Douglas Boulevard? Both sides, one side?
We're still working that out, whatever would make the most sense.
Okay.
And if we could connect pieces of sidewalk that are already there,
okay,
that would be the most preferable. Looking at right there around where the mall is, you would think, well, maybe on the interstate side of that, but that's a private piece of property there. It's a weird little piece. And so if we could do it on the other side and stay within the existing right-of-way that we have, that would be preferable. But we're just in the concept phase right now, so we're not sure.
Okay, and the multi-use trails, you will have something separate from the sidewalks for multi-use trails over there?
It would be one or the other, and I'll be honest with you, we don't really have a comprehensive multi-use path plan in the city, so there's really not much that it would be connecting to at this point. And so that's one of the things we're looking at as well. What else would it make sense to connect to?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And one thing to remember, the mall itself is in the process of reconceptualizing itself as well, because I mean, anybody who knows anything about shopping malls now in this period, a lot of them are really frankly struggling badly. And we're actually quite fortunate that we have a mall in the city of Douglasville that's actually doing relatively well compared to a lot of malls nationally. So, but they also understand that they have to reconceptualize the physical structure of the mall and its way it's integrated into the community. And so I think you're going to be seeing, they have not released any plans publicly yet, but they're going to be studying some ways of dealing with those parking lots, dealing with how to integrate the mall property back into the city in some way to make it more of an attractive entertainment type center rather than just simply being a big shopping mall. So that's something you're going to be seeing over the next few years as it evolves. All right, so our next item that we're going to be talking about is to be let me get my list right. Yes, we've been talking about the current project. Yeah, the current project list for what we're doing primarily under the downtown master plan. We have Patrice Williams, our Director of Community Development, who's going to talk to us about all the exciting things that are happening in downtown Douglasville and infrastructure improvements there.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for the opportunity. Thank you for coming out this evening to hear about what's happening in downtown Douglasville. I am Patrice Williams, the Community Development Director for the city. We have a lot going on. As you may or may not be aware of, we've had over 13 plans. We've been going through the planning process for the past couple of years. And so I'm kind of caught up in that with the North Side Plan, along with the Downtown Master Plan as well. And so we started with the Downtown Master Plan over a year ago. We followed, procedures that everyone else does. We did the RFP. We got several proposals. We went with TSW, the Downtown Development Authority was involved, along with the city and the Douglas County Development Authority. And so again, TSW was selected. We had a kickoff meeting. We had several meetings. We had about 6 meetings total. We met over the course of 6 months, and back in December, that plan was adopted. So this is the downtown focus area. We picked up, as you can see, if you're familiar with the Cultural Arts Center, so we picked up in that area. We crossed over what is now called Veterans Memorial Highway and along with 92. So the focus area includes the old jail site. If you're familiar with Church Street, it's at the corner down there on that end next to the cemetery that you might be familiar with as well. As you know, the city purchased the old jail site several months ago now for $850,000 from the county. And so that's considered phase 1. If you look at this picture here with the Douglasville Bridge, that's just a rendering. So I cannot say that it's going to look that exact way in 2020 or whenever it happens. But that is a rendering, and we're pretty excited about it. Once the jail site is demoed, you'll really start seeing things happen. Things are happening now. We're having to do a number of environmental studies. Chelsea is a part of that. So things are moving, you just don't see it. Let's see. So again, that's one of the renderings. Phase 1 will begin shortly. We are still working with TSW, and so we're going to have a lot of meetings. We would really appreciate if you would attend. In phase 1, we have an amphitheater. We're going to have a green space and an amphitheater, and so we want to hear from you as far as what does that look like. I see you getting excited about it. So we are just as excited, and so we're going to have, like I said, a number of meetings where we want to hear from you all. What do you want this to look like? What do you want this to feel like? And of course, we have approximately 8 acres of land here, but the amphitheater will not take up that entire space. It's going to be a mixed-use development, so we're looking at retail, residential, restaurants. Can you get excited about that? So we're really excited about the possibilities and with this space. And you've all seen these town centers. Everyone has one. Suwanee has one, Duluth has one, Woodstock. So we're just kind of following along what others have done, but making it our own. And that's just another picture there. You can imagine all of us out there on a nice green space. And there are 4 phases total. So we're looking at, this is phase 2 right here. That is right here is where City Hall currently is. And so what we would like to do eventually build a new City Hall. And that space would be possibly sold, made available to someone in the private sector to redevelop and maybe have something like a Croc Street or Pont City Market. Regarding your ward, Highway 5, there's been some great redevelopment. Along Highway 5, you have Del Taco. I haven't been there yet. I don't know if they're open. Okay, so that's why I haven't been there yet. Okay. And then, okay. And then we have the Arbor Square Shopping Center. That was a huge redevelopment project. I was trying to get the exact numbers, but they didn't quite get to me on time today, so I'm not exactly sure what that investment was, but I think everybody's pretty excited about that as well. And then McDonald's. I've got to mention McDonald's. Councilman Miller told me to mention McDonald's. But McDonald's is also being redesigned as well, similar to the one on Chapel Hill Road. So you'll see that taking place. They have their own vision. I think they call it 2020. And so all the McDonald's in Douglasville will be redeveloped over the course of the next few months. How is all this going to happen? With the downtown, redevelopment powers. And that's something I think Doug Stoner is going to talk about. I don't know if he's going to talk about it now or later. Now is good?
Happy to do that. Thanks. Yeah, excuse me. So my name's Doug Stoner. I actually work with the Douglas Chamber of Commerce. And just to make something very clear, so there's no confusion here, your councilmen and city council employees and folks, they can educate you about redevelopment authority powers. They just can't ask you to vote one way or the other. But I can. So as the Douglas Chamber is promoting and program for Vote Yes for the TAD, and that's part of the redevelopment powers. It's called a tax allocation district. And everybody goes, oh, tax. I hear that term, tax, right? Well, if you read, first of all, if you'll take a look at the very colorful page there that says Tax Allocation Districts 101, you know, what is a tax allocation district? It's very straightforward. It's a tool for redevelopment in a very specific area, a very particular district. And the other piece of paper you have is a proposed tax allocation district for the city of Douglasville. And if you notice, it's generally along most of your downtown area and your major commercial corridors in that area. And as was mentioned before, you were talking about town centers and redevelopment, and some cities were mentioned, and I won't take any offense, you forgot to mention Smyrna. I'm joking with her. Smyrna, if y'all been to Smyrna too, you've seen a lot of the redevelopment they've done in downtown Smyrna. All those communities have something in common. They had, their local community had adopted, had approved redevelopment powers and a tax allocation district. And how that works is, I want to kind of explain first some of the things about a TAD, because people get confused about what a TAD is. And it mentions here, of course, some of the things it does. It promotes growth in specific areas. Obviously, that creates employment opportunities. It encourages private investment. In fact, it leverages private investment, but in a way that a community and a city has a say-so over the matter. So you have a say in the sense of how that private investment and redevelopment is going to occur in a community. And as is mentioned here, this is going to be on the ballot. If you're, obviously, I assume everyone in this room is a registered voter in the city of Douglasville. So this will appear on your ballot at the bottom of the ballot, and I mean at the bottom of the ballot, called a special election for the city of Douglasville. And this is the actual language you see there. It says, shall the act be approved which authorizes the city of Douglasville to utilize tax allocation districts and redevelopment powers under the redevelopment powers law, and it may be amended from time to time. That's the legalese. And that what they're asking for is to give this community the ability to do something that pretty much all your surrounding communities who have done some amazing things have that tool. And so it's very critical, in my opinion, and as someone who's dealt with this subject matter for many years. I used to be the vice chairman of the Development Authority in Smyrna. So I spent 25 years as we redeveloped downtown Smyrna. And thank goodness we had the TAD, because it gave us a tool that we could use. And that process is a very open process. An example of that is a proposed district. But if y'all decide to approve this, which I hope you do, what that means is the city will have to go through a process to agree to adopt a TAD, an actual map. This is just proposed, but they have to go back to that process, and that's a public process throughout it. So you have opportunities to have your input about how that operates. And I know Councilman Miller understands that. So this is not something like, this is the map and that's it. This is just a proposed map to give people an idea of how a TAD works. One thing I really want to make a point on, how does a TAD affect taxes? Because you see the word tax in there. It does not raise your residential or commercial property rates. In other words, your millage rate. Now I'm going to explain how a TAD works. This may be a little confusing, I know it is at times, but it's actually very simple. If the community, your community creates a specific TAD district, the property values, the assessed values I should say, in that district are frozen at a certain, whatever date they freeze it at. So let's say it's next year in 2019, whatever the assessed values of those properties are in that district are frozen. Someone wants to come in and let's say wants to do a major redevelopment, buy up some property, maybe some of the sites that the city has acquired potentially. An example up in Belmont Hill, up in Smyrna, we had the old Belmont Hill Shopping Center, which was built in 1954. Some of you are nodding your head, so you see what we've done over there. Well, that was due to a TAD, and it was a private property owner who said, I'd like to redevelop. And we, the city, sat down and said, we'll work with you, but here are some of the things that we want as a community as part of that redevelopment. So it gives you the ability to have that conversation with the private sector. But here's what it helped do. To redo that development or do any major development like that, you have to put in new public infrastructure. And a lot of times that's a big issue when you're redeveloping a project. So you've now frozen the values in that particular, say on that particular piece of property. That property owner comes to the city council and says, I'd like to do this nice development. The city has conversations, negotiations with them. Says that we'll agree to it, but here's what we want as part of your development. And at that point, the city can issue a TAD bond. I'll make something very clear. A TAD bond is not backed by the taxpayers of all the citizens of Douglasville. It is not a general obligation bond. It is a revenue bond, which means it's backed specifically by the properties in the TAD. And so what that means is that new redevelopment's done, the property values go up, correct? When you do a nice new redevelopment like you've seen it, we mentioned up at Belmont and Smyrna. The city, the county, and the school system continues to get the assessed value that was frozen at the time, what they've always been collecting. But that new additional value that's been created by that redevelopment above the old assessed value, that goes to pay the bond off. So in a sense, the property owner themselves are paying the bond due to the redevelopment that's been done on the site. So those who benefit are paying the freight, is the best way I can describe it. You over here in this ward are not going to be paying that TAD bond. It's just in that district, it's just those property owners who are doing the redevelopment. And again, the city has to approve that. That's not something you just apply for and it's automatically given. There's a process through that. So that's why it's such a great tool for communities. And that's why, try to make that clear when you see the word TAD, or tax allocation district. Nobody's raising anybody's taxes. There's a full process to this, and it's for very specific areas. And it kind of lists some of the different things that a TAD can do. It can do infrastructure, buildings, public and private housing potentially as part of a mixed-use development, let's say. Can do even art, cultural facilities, and improvement of pedestrian access. Really a very broad category of type of public infrastructures and other type of things that can be done. Again, those type of items will be approved on a case-by-case basis depending on what type of projects are being done in that TAD area. And it can only be done inside that district that's created. So as it was mentioned, we already mentioned what some communities, Smyrna and several other ones, Avondale Estates mentioned that, they've used a TAD. Forest Park's used a TAD. And of course, Woodstock was mentioned. And of course, the city of Atlanta has Atlantic Station. Not saying we're building Atlantic Station here, but that was a TAD that helped with that issue, particularly since you had a steel mill sitting there at one time. I'm going to stop there, and I hope if I explain how a TAD works, and I know it seems can be a little confusing at times, but happy to answer any questions. Obviously, Councilman, anything you might want to ask of me too.
Thank you, Mr. Stoner. Appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions regarding TAD districts or implementation?
Did you actually understand? I'm going to be honest with you. Did you all understand how I explained how TAD works? That all makes sense to you? I don't want to leave one in here and think otherwise. And by the way, I just want to put this out there. Some people, for some reason, I'll be honest with you, Councilman, I don't understand. Some people have gotten confused. This has something to do with the SPLOST. Has nothing to do with the SPLOST. So if someone says, oh, this is not about the SPLOST. I don't know why that is, but I just heard that last day or two, and I just want to clear that up, that this has nothing to do with the SPLOST. Oh, vote yes.
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the city as an institution cannot advocate for you to vote in favor. However, I can and I will, and I strongly recommend that you vote. Oh, by the way, I just realized when I started here, I forgot to say something. My name is Terry Miller, by the way. I'm your city councilman for Ward 1. Greetings. You may be wondering why we're talking so much about downtown, since this is a Ward 1 meeting, but I'd like to put into perspective because let's keep in mind, even though, the downtown is not part of our ward, it's the heart of our city, And the moment you neglect your downtown, you really you're neglecting your city as a whole. And it's very important. Even if you don't live in the city, the downtown of your community is really the heart and soul of your community, and it really needs to be attended to. A lot of what we're doing here, I've been here long enough, and I think a number of you have been as well, where you've heard people saying over and over, nothing ever happens in Douglasville, nothing ever gets done. Well, this is getting it done. That's what we're doing a TAD for, because this is making something happen. Things are changing in the city, and I think tremendously for the better. And you're going to start to see, when we start to do things like this, you're going to start to see those changes around you, and you're already witnessing it now. All right, so moving along, we have now, let's talk about taxes, which I'm sure you're more than happy to. Let's see, I think we have, our city manager is going to discuss the millage rate and the slight changes that have occurred to that recently. And so, Marcia, I'll put you on the hot seat.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do I have slides? I don't know. If not, I think I can wing it. As Councilman Miller mentioned, we do, am I advancing it? If you can, you're better at it than I am. Millage rate update. So just to let you all know, we have had an increase in our millage rate, and we, of course, had to go through the public hearing process to make that happen. So as you can take a look at our sales taxes for, this is a comparison for fiscal years from FY17 to FY18. For those who may or may not know, we're on a July to June fiscal year each year. So this shows you the amount of sales taxes and where we were from year to year. The light gray color is where we are currently, and the dark color is where we were previously. What I can say about sales taxes, and yes, sales taxes are going up, but in years past, I would say 15 years ago, as the city of Douglasville was growing and things were a little bit better, and then we faced a slump in the economy, our services never decreased, but the cost of providing those services remained the same and increased, but we lost those revenues. So even when you saw some of your property values dip, the city of Douglasville and the county and the school system took the brunt of that. So if services weren't cut back, where were those revenues coming from? In most cases, they were coming from reserves. In some cases, they were coming in lesser quality service. It's just the reality of what it is. Mr. Greg Roberts, who works in what will be our public service department, for many of you know, our maintenance and sanitation department, we're currently looking at one of our Splice projects to build a new administration and headquarters for him. Those are projects that we had to forego and make work with what we have, and we're willing to do that, of course, because being good servants of your tax dollars. But quite frankly, when we work in those conditions, we work inefficiently. So we can't indeed provide the best quality service for you all. So raising taxes and making that proposal to the elected officials does not come lightly. But what we never want to do is put the elected officials in a position where we're moving right along and then the economy hits and we're still having to provide those services for you, but then our revenues decline. We would far rather be in a position where we can afford our operating costs, because yes, we can build a new building, but there are costs to serve those buildings. So we want to make certain that those operating costs are able to be met, as well as future projections. It's just like your home. The city that we take care of, the 35,000 residents and the infrastructure that's within it, it's just like your home. It constantly takes care. Your roads constantly need repairing. It's a never-ending cycle of cost to be added to it. So when we held the millage rate steady for many of those years, don't think that we actually held steady. We actually lost money, because your services were either remaining the same or increasing, but the money that you were bringing in was not enough to adequately meet services. So just to take a look at where we spend money, this is your general fund dollars. This does not include the special purpose local option sales tax that the voters approved back in 2016. This is just what it costs to run basic services in the city. This also does not include the money that you provide to the city through your sanitation fund. This is just your property tax, your sales tax. As you can see, 76% of our taxes, 76% of our revenues come from your taxes. We're not like one of those governments that we run our own utilities. We don't have utilities. We don't have power, water, gas. And tough times, many of those local governments were able to rely on some of those services. We didn't. So when that 76% went down and the services didn't, again, you can see there was going to be a gap in what we were able to bring in. So the rest of these are very small pots of money, but the bulk of how we operate comes from your tax dollars. Again, as you can see, this is a breakdown in the tax dollars that you provide to us. So the bulk of how we operate are between sales taxes, franchise fees, and property taxes. Excise taxes, hotel motel tax, this is a special revenue source as we pull in, but the bulk of how we operate are primarily through taxes. So this was your bond millage rate back in 2013. Back in 2013, some of you remember the city and the county was going through service delivery negotiations. And basically what the state requires is that every 10 years, jurisdictions have to negotiate who provides what service. We're probably one of the only states in the United States that actually cities and counties can provide the same service. Many places in the United States, counties are regulated to provide this service and cities are regulated to provide that service. But in the state of Georgia, we lobby and jockey to provide the same service. So therefore, we are relegated to every 10 years negotiating who provides that service. And of course, when we provide that service, there becomes a cost. For 25 years, the city of Douglasville paid the same amount of money for fire services. So very similar to the situation we were in, the county is saying, well, you all, we haven't raised taxes, but the cost of providing fire has increased. The operations of fire services have increased. So therefore, what you were paying 25 years ago is not the same of what you should pay now. As a city resident, you also pay county taxes. So the argument that the city had was that, well, city residents pay county taxes, so shouldn't that suffice? Well, at the end of the day, the city ended up having to pay an additional $1.5 million for fire service every year. Where were we going to get that? We were in a slump in the economy. It wasn't in the budget. So therefore, we did have to raise the millage rate. Also included in that was $300,000 annually that we had to pay to animal control. You know, there's a new animal control facility. I think that's great for Douglasville, Douglas County, but ultimately as city residents, you all are paying for that through your city and your county taxes. So at a tune of $1.8 million overnight, our budget increase. That's not inclusive of also the increase of services. So go back to the other side if you don't mind. So and again, this is your bond millage as it relates to your public safety building. I'm sorry, go to the next slide. I'll show you this. So this is your maintenance and operation bond. So this is where we were before you raised taxes. We had been at 3.8 for about 10 years. And then that big increase to 5.8 was to pay for half a year of fire services. And then the next year, we had to fill the full brunt of that total cost of $1.8 million. We were able to do a slight decrease back in 2016 and maintain that slight decrease back in 2017. But the presentation that was presented to you by the Community Development Director, as you can see, we are really playing catch up with infrastructure. And again, the cost, there is a cost to maintain. There's a cost, once you pave those roads, there's still a cost to maintain the roads. So in order for us to predict and to meet future obligations to operate, we had to make the recommendation to increase taxes, along with maintaining and keeping up with the cost of payroll and salaries for our personnel, the bulk of which went to our police department. Many of you probably heard on WSB and some of the other news reports that the city of Atlanta had done a market study to increase salaries for their police officers. We did that, but we did it a little bit differently. The chief and I sat down and said, what is it going to take for a salary number for your patrol officers and above to be able to maintain and recruit police officers? And you got to give me a number that we can afford. This is how much I'm telling you, you can't go above, but give me a number I can recommend to the elected officials. And the chief and I sat down and came back with a number of $44,000 a year annually for patrol officers, and those positions are, those salaries are adjusted up as they move up in rank. And we started from that point and gave that number to the consultant to come back to us with a budget figure that we can maintain. And again, that does not include benefits. And if you think about it, many of these officers, we have one in the back of the room, he's just starting his shift. So he's going to be on all night. If he were a patrol officer patrolling the streets, he's only making $44,000 a year. Granted, we do have very good benefits, but that's something that we have to look at to be competitive at least every 3 years. So the commitment that I've made to the elected officials is I will be recommending that every 3 years. I promise you we're not the only jurisdiction doing that. And the culture of law enforcement in this nation today, quite frankly, those guys and ladies have a very tough job just with public perception and just with what they have to deal with on a regular basis. So we want to make certain that we're compensating them well, and we want to make certain that the things that we provide, not only just in base salary, but they have what they need to adequately do their jobs. So when we looked at those adjustments and adjustments throughout the city, those costs came to a total for personnel and salary. We have just shy of 300 employees, about $850,000 minus benefits. So that included with increase in operations costs is the reason why we recommended a slight increase in your millage rate. We had public hearings. We really didn't have many questions. We did our best to try to make certain that we explained to you all where your dollars were going. And as you can see, that is still below the huge increase that we had to make for the increase when we did service delivery. Our goal is to make certain that we maintain a healthy reserve, but also continue to improve. Many of the cities that were mentioned in the TAD, quite frankly, I visited all those cities. I know many of their managers and elected officials. When we're in Douglasville, the thing I think citizens, you know, I know we crave and we want a lot, but quite frankly, we're probably about 10 years behind. That's just the truth. We're about 10 years behind. So many of the things that we're doing now, those cities did 10 to 15 years ago. So it's going to cost us to catch up. We're going to get there, but we really need your support to do that. So when you look at the total with the bond millage that we had a decrease in for the public safety building, that was a general obligation bond. The public safety building on Fairburn Road, the taxpayers went out and voted to have a bond to pay for that facility. That's a very nice facility. The bond pays for it, but not the operations cost. That building, we have to cover that cost in the general fund. So as you can see, we're still lower than where we were back in 2015. So for the 6-year SPLOST, the SPLOST is huge. It's huge, it's huge, it's huge. We went almost 15 years without a SPLOST. It is almost inconceivable that a metro community our size can operate without a SPLOST. What the SPLOST does for you, it takes the burden off of your general fund, as you can see, the property taxes, to allow us to improve capital infrastructure. Mr. Roberts can tell you many of the roads, and you know this if you've lived in this neighborhood for a long time, haven't been paved in over 20 years. It's a great testament to say that the roads are in good condition, but you can't maintain that type of infrastructure on a regular basis. Many communities that were mentioned earlier, a SPLOST is just a regular thing that they do. It's just something that they do to make certain that they take the burden off of their general fund. So as you can see in transportation that was mentioned earlier, there's a ton of resurfacing that we're going to be able to do through this SPLOST. A huge portion of our SPLOST funds go to that 45%. A lot of equipment we can pay for, gateway and beautification. There will be a presentation at the council meeting coming up for the gateway interchange at Fairburn Road and I-20. The reason why we want to make certain that we beautify that gateway, many of the things, the gateways that you see, for instance, the one that was just done at Six Flags, you've seen them at Cumberland, you've seen them at Perimeter. We're getting ready to do that. Many community improvement districts do those. We don't have a community improvement district, so we're going to have to do it on our own. So we're going to do it, we're going to beautify it, and the benefit is we want to make certain that when folks are driving along I-20, whether they're going east and west, that Fairburn Road is the second interchange that they come to, but it's a major part of coming into the core, that they actually have a nice place to come into, which hopefully will help to spur development along Highway 92. Another portion of those funds will go toward beautification on the abandoned portions of 92. When the Highway 92 relocation route is done, from Brown Street coming south to the railroad track will be abandoned. It will be a local street. And from Hospital Drive north to Bankhead Highway will be abandoned. So that will be a burden upon the city to improve, because now you know the majority of the people will be driving on the new route. And of course, we mentioned Douglas Boulevard. Several different things we're doing in the parks that includes the town green, public safety, a lot of equipment. It takes a lot of equipment and hardware and training for those guys to be able to do their job effectively. We want to make certain they have the best resources possible. And also facilities. As I mentioned, the maintenance and sanitation facility, we're doing tons of city hall renovation. We will do an open house so you can actually see what we're doing, making use of the resources that we have. The city has grown, city halls have changed. The future will be a new city hall, but right now, it would be most effective if we start that planning 5 to 6 years down the road. But for right now, we're going to make use for what we have. And we've also expanded into what was the old conference center for many of you all who remember. And that is our 6-year SPLOST, and as of April, we will be 3 years into that SPLOST. The goal is to build out the things that we currently are behind on and to make certain that everything else is shovel ready, so that when we get ready at the end of this SPLOST, we're coming to you at town hall meetings just like this to show you these things are shovel ready. If you approve another SPLOST, this is the next phase of what we can do with your approval of that penny sales tax. And that's it. Questions? Access to the PowerPoint.
I'm sorry.
Access to the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Can we put this on the city website? Yeah, we can put it on the city website, and that way everybody can. West, I can see. Okay. People often say, why can't you run the city more like a business? Why can't you run government more like a business? And it's a fair question to a certain extent, but it isn't at the same time. I run a business, I own a business, I've had it for 14 years now in the city. And I'll say this, if you want to do that, okay, if you want to say, let's run the city like a business, then let's look at it like a business. And businesses have to compete. Businesses don't operate in a vacuum. And one of the most important things you have to do when you run a business is to reinvest in that business. You don't slide along and just assume that the revenue stream will continue, the customer stream will continue, and so forth. It doesn't work that way. You have to compete, and you have to compete on a daily basis. You have to continually try to improve your business. You have to make the product better. You have to improve the services. As Marcia pointed out, we're competing against a lot of other communities in this metro area that are 10 years ahead of us. Okay? They've been making these improvements in the prior decade. We're just now catching up. if you want a successful community, if you want a livable community, you've got to have a place where people just absolutely enjoy spending time there, which means that you have to have those amenities. We're looking at a new generation that's coming along, the generation that looks at life and services and looks at infrastructure in a very different way. Good way of thinking about that, you know, those of you who are my age or near that, you know, we grew up wanting stuff. We like stuff, we collect stuff. There's all these articles right on the internet now. They're telling us now that, you know what, your kids don't want your stuff. Get rid of it now. It's true. My daughter can attest to that right now. She doesn't want any of my stuff. They want experiences. They want to do things. They want to go places. They want to see stuff. And that's part of what the new city is becoming a place to go, to do things, to see things, to experience and be part of life in that community. And that's where we have to head. We've got to go that way. If we want to maintain, if we want to keep the population we have, if we want to grow, if we want to have those pretty things, those nice things that other cities have, we have to invest. We have to put it back into the community. So that was my little soapbox for the evening. I guess that was pretty much the major part of the presentation, and I'll just open the floor for any additional questions that anybody has, or if anybody has any comments that you'd like to talk about, especially including Ward 1, if you've got any issues here, that this is a good time to bring it up. I hope you're enjoying the new pavement that is being placed throughout the community. We've got some brand new streets going in after long last, as Marcia mentioned coming out of the Splice funds. Is there anything that anybody has that you'd like to contribute or ask? June, I know we can't keep you quiet. Do you have a question? Yeah, come on up.
Yes, I have a question. I know there's a lot of communities in the greater Atlanta area are embracing the concept of getting the movie industry in it. Have been any efforts in Douglasville to try to lure some of those people to maybe shoot a few movies here?
We've actually had a pretty good success so far. That we've had a number of movies and TV shows that have been filming here.
I know a few of them.
We've had The Founder was filmed here. They built an entire McDonald's in downtown. An old 60s McDonald's was built.
Mm-hmm.
Stranger Things was filmed here for 2 seasons. I guess the 3rd one is coming up pretty soon. Let's see, what else is being done here? I think we've had...
Don't Kill the Messenger. There's been a bunch of them.
We do have a lot of filming efforts here at the city. A lot of times films come with project names that are alias names, so we don't necessarily broadcast that or publicize what movies are here. We currently have 4 movies filming right now in the city. A lot of times they use city facilities and they cover up the names and whatnot, just so sometimes they may, do obstruction permits and obstruct the streets, but usually they do use like a public safety facility. They use a few city buildings. They've used City Hall before, but we don't necessarily publicize what movies have come when they are here. Afterwards we will, and we do have the Douglas County Film Trail. If you go downtown in a lot of areas throughout the city that they filmed, if you go, you use your cell phone, or you can stand there, you can read about what movies were filmed there. So we do have about 4 projects right now in the city that are being filmed, but we just don't publicize it.
Chelsea Jackson, our Assistant City Manager. And many of you may already know that the old jail has been... Do you want to go ahead?
Well, somebody asked who Chelsea was.
Oh, this is... Yeah, she's our Assistant City Manager.
Chelsea, there's a couple folks up here.
My apologies. I'm Chelsea Jackson. I'm the Assistant City Manager.
Thank you, Chelsea. As many of you know, also, the old jail was used for a lot of filming productions as well. And of course, now since we bought it and we're actually going to tear it down, it's no longer going to be available. I was actually a little bit upset when I first heard that we were considering demolishing it, until I found out that we were actually only making about, I think, something around $100,000 a year from renting that as a studio or as a film set. So we really weren't making much money at all on it. Well, I made a suggestion to the Film Commission. I believe that they're going to take it up and we'll see if it actually comes to fruition. Right now, it might have been mentioned, we're in the environmental study process of looking, because there's some issues on that site that have to be cleaned up and so forth. So we've got to clean the site up before we can even demolish the building. But the thought I had was, instead of just going, because it's going to cost a lot of money just to tear it down, and everybody knows Hollywood loves to blow stuff up. So our Film Commission is actively looking for a studio that needs a scene in which they wish to blow up a building. And if we can get it blown up for free, we'll save, it's a twofer. We'll save money on the demolition, and we get rid of an eyesore. So we'll see how that comes about. Got to think outside the box, folks. You know. All right. Well, if anybody has any additional questions, yes, sir.
You all spoke about how the TAD does not cause your taxes to increase. However, with you creating this redevelopment, or through the TAD funds creating that redevelopment, over time, since it's going to draw in more people, would that not ultimately have some sort of adverse effect against our overall taxes?
Having more people?
Yes. Well, I guess with the redevelopment, and obviously, I mean, that's going to, like you said, it's going to attract more people and bring them in, which means our services will ultimately increase, which means the cost of those services would have to increase, which means it would have to ultimately be offset, I'm assuming, by the residents that live in that community.
Well, number one, Doug looks like he's ready for, I was going to say, first of all, having more people come into your community is a good problem to have.
But ultimately, someone's got to pay for those services of those people coming in here, and sometimes, granted, they come in and then they go back out, so therefore it's left for us to maintain, I guess, the redevelopment that we're creating through the TAD funds.
Yeah, okay.
Can I just answer that perfect example? So in Smyrna, I'll just make this point. I was actually just talking to some city folks. When we started redevelopment in Smyrna, our millage rate was 12.99. Now, we have our own fire department and, you know, water, sewer, stuff like that, but 12.99. After we started doing our redevelopment, the values went up. We created what we call the halo effect, meaning even around the TAD area, even outside the TAD area, your property values went up because everybody wanted to be near that new redevelopment. As I was mentioning, millennials and young people and folks wanted to move there. We were an aging community in Smyrna, and since our age was going this way, we're now number 3 in the metro area with the number of, as a percentage of millennials. 29% of our population is millennials now. Our millage rate is now 8.99. You're right, we have more people. We went from a population of about 25,000 to now 56,000. Just explain, that was over a 25-year period. Okay. Yeah, but that's outside the city limits. We don't get anything. That's not, our city limits go right up to the Braves property line, but they're not in the city. All that to be said, to your point, is, you know, this type of redevelopment generally brings a lot of attraction, creates a halo, which, you know, if you increase your property values, it may mean you're going to be able to reduce your millage rate over a longer period of time. I'm just giving you an example of what happened in Smyrna. Had we not done that, we probably wouldn't have been able to lower our millage rate because our values, our tax digest would not have gone up. So, just an example of that.
Thanks, Doug. A good question. Yeah, thank you. Anybody have anything else? June, yes. Yeah, come on down. I'm going to give you a microphone then.
How are the buses going to affect our city? How are the buses that are coming going to affect our city?
I can very fortunately say that is not a city issue. That is completely with the county. And I know that some of the routes are in the city.
But they'll be going downtown.
I don't. Some of them, there's a downtown route. Does anybody know? Is there a downtown route for them?
There is a downtown route, but I think that what some folks are probably forgetting is the route that would go down Campbellton. That's going to be short-lived. Campbellton Street, the crossing at the railroad crossing, is going to be closed by Norfolk Southern. That will probably be closed in 3 years. So the buses may be downtown, but what's currently proposed will not exist. They will have to determine another route. So those folks know the Campbellton Street crossing that currently is right there at Bank, that will be closed by Norfolk Southern once that tunnel is done. You will no longer be able to cross at that intersection. So currently right now, the bus proposal route that we've seen shows the buses coming straight down Campbellton Street. That will not happen. Not at least if the buses are on the road between, or after a period of 3 years from now. That is correct.
That's correct. keeps using the term buses. They aren't really technically buses. They're just big vans, essentially what they are. Right, exactly. But yeah, the McCarley crossing will still be open for auto traffic.
It will. It probably will be the least efficient way because of having
You get turn. You know,
I would suspect that it would make more sense that they would get on the 92 route in some way, shape, or form because of just speed of travel.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
I'm trying to remember the name of the program, if it's the ATL or whatever that was passed, where local counties get to vote on participation in a Metro Atlanta transportation plan. And, I mean, I know you don't have a crystal ball as to what we're going to do in Douglas County, but when would we even vote on that, and what might be the possible effects if we opted into that?
Well, I can't necessarily answer that to say, you know, when or a timeline. I can tell you that Mayor Robinson serves on your Atlanta Regional Commission. So my recommendation would be that you would seek her out, or maybe what we can do is I can ask her to give you some information on some of their latest meetings. I know they have been meetings. Who will determine when the county votes? Doug, you look like you're getting ready to answer because Doug's an elected official.
I was. I used to be a state senator, a state rep, and a city councilman. So, and I used to be I used to chair the subcommittee in the Senate on intermodal rail and transit. To the point on the ATL board, the new transit entity that they created through Metro Atlanta, that process, the board gets elected before December 1st this year, which is 16 members. 6 are appointed by elected officials on the state level. The other 10 are elected by other elected officials in the metro area in these districts. Anyway, to your point, nobody's going to do anything that a community doesn't want to do, and the community itself, meaning like it has to be the county, has to call the vote. So and I want to clear something up that gets a lot of confusion. You're not part of MARTA. You're not part of the MARTA Act. So you can't call a MARTA vote here. But your county can call for a transit tax for 30 years, if you so desire. Again, that's up to your county elected officials to make that decision. And that's part of if they want to do that, then how does that fit into the bigger scheme of the plans in the sense of the regional transit network and things like that? So there's a process, and you're going to get to have a say in that process in the sense of if Douglas County decides they want to do a tax and they want to do some type of transit service, extensive transit service in the county.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you. Good question. Anybody else? All right, well, if there are no more questions, thank you. I really want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I appreciate it on a weeknight. Especially those of you who don't live in the ward and don't live in the city. It's just great to see people who take an interest in the community. I mean, the great philosopher Woody Allen said, 90% of success is just showing up. And please keep showing up. We need folks to show up. Keep us accountable. Keep us on our toes because we need that. Don't ignore it. Now, don't wait for us to raise your taxes or to try to take your dogs away from you. Show up and vote and participate because we need you to do that. So thank you, everybody. It's been a great evening. Appreciate you coming out.